This is an Empty Closet Radio podcast. Get more at facebook.com/emptyclosetradio.
Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sam.
And this is The Empty Closet.
The show for everyone, whether you're in the closet
Or out and proud.
or somewhere in between.
Grindr. You know that app. It's controversial. It's the app that, uses your GPS location to show you, how far you are from your next possible hookup and arranges them in distance away from you. It is the greatest tool and the greatest curse that gay men have had this century. Would you agree?
Yeah, I have some... There's a lot of problems with the Grindr app, and while, yes, it does take away the need to wear the right outfit, the right tie in the right bar and have the right look on your face, it does have some problems, some fairly major problems.
Well, it has some fairly well-documented problems with racism, body shaming, problems about stigma around disclosure for your HIV status. The list goes on. People are terrible on that platform. But I want to talk about something that might be a deeper problem. So, as you might know, I think it was about a year ago, Grindr changed hands. It was sold from an American-owned startup company yay, aren't we fun, we're the fastest growing social network in the world, to be bought by a company that develops games. So it's a game company. Great, we've got a dating platform that is seen as a game. And it's Chinese-owned, which is interesting, seen as our government is saying to Chinese companies that they can't build our communications infrastructure because they're not trustworthy enough.
I was going to say it's interesting because there's still plenty of areas in China that homophobia is built into local law enforcement and things.
Oh, totally. I've travelled quite extensively through China and some surrounding Asian countries, and oh my god, the size of people's closets there is huge. It's ridiculous.
Right, so anyway, changed hands, new owners, what's the goss?
Right. So the head of the company, he has, I don't know what possessed him. What possesses people to put on their social media when they own the biggest gay dating app in the world, that they think that marriage should just be, a holy matrimony between a man and a woman? Literally, that's what he put.
So probably what possessed him was just not thinking. Maybe he thinks that people don't use it for dating. Maybe he thinks they just use it as a GPS-based hookup app.
I think it's ridiculous. How could you have somebody like that at the helm?
No, of course it's ridiculous. I didn't say that it was reasonable. I just said that that's possibly what he was thinking, because the alternative is just that he thinks either A, nobody's ever going to look at his social media. That never happens, does it? And also that he thought that his, nobody would just notice his opinions, that they didn't really matter.
Do you know who noticed it? And this is what I find so hilarious. The journalists that broke the story are journalists that are working for, it's a magazine called Into, which is, if anybody knows the business structure, is actually owned by Grindr. So they've just written their own smear piece. Great.
Although, I have to say, though, I don't really blame them, because can you imagine if you worked for what you assumed was a gay-friendly company because it was entirely tied up with a gay dating app, and then the owner of the company decided to slander gay people? Would you not want to break that news? Would you not want to be like, hey, there's a serious issue here, how can we bring attention to it?
You know, what's really interesting, though, is that this is the topic of the moment, but everybody forgets that it's happened before. Let's not talk about before Grindr was the big thing. Manhunt was the big thing. And I know I shouldn't be spreading all the brand names around, but that was what people were using, right? And nobody realized that they were 30% owned by some super conservative Christian group that were actively lobbying against the gay agenda.
But I guess there's something to be said for, and I say something to be said a bit facetiously here, something to be said for people who won't let their personal beliefs in the way of profiting off other people.
Yes, it does all come down to money. So I feel like asking everybody to like just think about like, especially if you are like generating profit for them, just think about whether you really want your profits going to these sorts of companies, these sorts of places, you know. And then the subtext there is, by the way, remember when we did that episode where I deleted my Grindr?
Empty Closet Radio. Listen to us using your TuneIn radio app on your smartphone. Very smart.
So I guess this sparks a bigger discussion in the gay community. We've got the head of one of our very large companies being like, you know, I don't really believe in gay marriage, but, you know, what's it my business? More or less. I paraphrase. That's like more or less what he said. Which he's since retracted, I think, due to pressure. Anyway, so it does spark a bit of a conversation about the opinions around marriage in the queer community. Have you been to a marriage ceremony since it's been legal?
Yes, and it was glorious and wonderful, and I was so happy.
See, I have been invited to a couple of them, one of which I couldn't attend, and the other one is still due to happen.
Are you excited?
I'm super excited. I think it's going to be, like, just amazing to finally see people who have loved each other for, like, 20 or 30 odd years finally being able to formalize that relationship.
Yeah, and I have to say the bit that I was really touched at was when the celebrant said, I'm so glad that I can say it this way. Marriage is defined as, and didn't have to say, according under Australian law, marriage is between a man and a woman, rah rah. Like, and it was just such a relief to acknowledge that, you know, openly in a ceremony at the time. And that was really great. So I really loved it. And I also really loved, not even the ones I've been to, but like, you know, people who do get married after they've been together for decades, or people who are at the end of their life, and it gives them that bit of security about what's going to happen to, you know, my body, what's going to happen to my kids and things like this. Like, it gives their relationship that legal standing.
But this is not the view of everyone, because sometimes, as I have heard some friends of mine say, why would we want to be like straight people? Is this not just an extension of heteronormativity that the gay community has been fighting for so long?
So it's called homonormative. Is actually where everything else is the same except that you've got same-sex partner, but you value no sex before marriage, you value monogamy, you value, you know, 2.5 kids and a white picket fence. Like, the aim of the idea that you aim for, this is the pinnacle, this is the life to have, right? And whether you're same-sex attracted or not, you can still aim for that heteronormative principle now that you have marriage equality. Now, I'm not of this opinion because I think that different strokes for different folks, and if you want to be in a monogamous relationship, then go for it. If you want to be in a non-monogamous relationship and you still want to get married, then go for it, as long as everybody's communicating clearly. And if you don't want to get married at all, nobody's going to force you to. So I think my opinion of it is that it's a good thing, but I can understand why people don't like it.
Well, I think, like, there's quite a few people that maybe when they've gone through their coming out process, they'd like made peace with the fact that they weren't going to get married. And then like suddenly there's this option and it's like, oh, I don't know if I want that option.
I think it's also, so way back when, so if you're looking at like the 20s and 30s, so nearly 100 years ago, a lot of queer activists wanted to be as far from normal as possible. So you didn't want to, unless like you were either deeply closeted or you were constantly in drag, you slept with everybody that you could, you know, there was the culture around it was not a culture that emphasized long-term, this person is my partner.
And there was no space for that middle ground because of homophobia being rife amongst the middle class.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's still a lot of holdover from that. Like there's certainly some of the older queer people that I've heard who don't necessarily support marriage equality, phrased it as, we need to dismantle the whole system, or why would we want to be like them? We're not trying to be straight, you know, and kind of saw it as a straight institution.
But I think there is that whole new generation, and I always I guess I can only share from my own experience, which is mainly around gay guys or bi guys. And there's this whole kind of shift where it used to be that gay guys didn't want to be like the jock that used to bash them up at school. But now it's like actually that fight for the middle ground, that middle territory where you can have all the things that are like hyper masculine and still be gay. Like that's what people are chasing now. And so there's all these people that are in the middle ground and that are kind of in that space where they're like, oh, maybe I would get married, but not sure. You know, like I feel like the space for that middle area has opened more.
I think there's also something to be said for the fact that there's a lot of people, whether you're a member of the rainbow community or whether you're a member of the beige community, there's a lot of people that struggle to understand the thing that just because I do or don't want something doesn't mean everyone else is the same. Like there's a lot, we've met gay people who go, I don't care about gay marriage because I don't want to get married. It's actually not just about you. Like there are other people this affects, and do you have no sense of community and things like this, and they just don't.
Empty Closet Radio. Like us on Facebook.
I guess that poses the question, Sam, about is love actually dead? If people don't want to get married anymore, if people have like these disposable relationships where they just find like the next guy on whatever app it is that they're using, or, you know, does that mean that there's something wrong with love at the moment?
I really hate this idea. I'm going to be a little bit ranty for a moment. I'm sorry. I really, really, really hate this idea that one, non-monogamy means that you don't love your partner or you can't love your partner. Two, that the only way you can be in a long-term relationship is to want marriage. And three, that just because a relationship is short-term means it's disposable. Like, I hate this idea that, and this comes back to that heteronormative thing, that we only value the longest relationships and they're the only ones that are worth anything. And look, there's some good reasons for that and some crap reasons for that, but it's not necessarily that people even want to get married. Like some of the, and this is largely with heterosexual couples because they did get married, but some of the longest couples I know who have the healthiest relationships either didn't get married because they didn't think they wanted that piece of paper, or they got married, for instance, because one of them, they were living in Indonesia and unmarried women couldn't work as teachers at the time, and so they got married. They'd been together for like 30 years and had grown up children, but they didn't need to formalize their relationship because that didn't lessen or make their commitment any better. You know, like it didn't impact how they thought of each other.
Yeah, and that seems to make a bit more sense to me. Like that seems to make a lot more sense.
Yeah, I think there is still a cultural thing, and this is perhaps a failing of, it could be a failing of some of the way that the debate went down last year, quite aside from all the terribleness of the fact that we had to have it in the first place, is that people seem to look at marriage as the zero sum of love. You know, you get there and that means you've made it and you love each other. Like, you still need to work at your relationships, like, if you're going to stay in them.
It's not crossing the finish line, it's actually the start line.
Yeah, and also, but there's people who'll say, you know, like old school etiquette for weddings was that if they're engaged or married, you invited the partner, but if not, they're not important enough to come because that's that relationship. They haven't made the commitment, right? They haven't made the commitment. It doesn't matter if they've bought a house together and have kids together. They haven't committed to each other.
Andrew's face is dropping right now.
Yeah, Andrew's face is something to see. So I think it's a holdover of that point of view. I don't think love is dead. I think that there's something to be said for, I mean, I know it more through talking to you and through the gay men. I know that there's this kind of hookup culture that is pushed in some of the gay community.
And is actually completely unavoidable, it feels like.
Yeah, so, you know, but in the same way, I think that's just as toxic as saying that everybody has to aim for long-term monogamy where they legally bind themselves to another person, you know, and it's going to be great difficulty to get out of it. Like, I don't think either of those is healthy if it's your only option. And I think that in some areas, you know, we go too far. If we go, no, you have to do this. Like, no, let people have choice.
Sam, you're always a fan of the middle ground.
I'm always a fan of people communicating with each other and doing what makes them happy.
Well, there are lots more discussions to be had about like communicating with each other in hookup culture, but there's not enough time for them on tonight's show. I do think that it makes it so hard when I feel like the headline that we have for this little section is love dead. I actually kind of think maybe it is not dead, but it is lost. It is definitely lost. And I feel like all the trauma about people's relationships that has been dug up from the debate that we had to have about marriage equality has just made it worse.
I think that some people are raw about it, perhaps. I certainly wouldn't say that love is dead, but hence going to, same-sex marriages, which are lovely.
Well, yes, obviously it works out for some people,
Yeah, but the thing to remember, I guess, and this sounds disheartening, but I actually mean it in a positive way, is like most relationships don't work out. Statistically, most people don't stay with the first person they ever date until one of them dies, right? So most relationships don't work out. That doesn't mean that love is dead. Love can change, and love can permutate, and sometimes it ends poorly, and sometimes it just ends through circumstance, and sometimes it doesn't end, but just because something, you finish a formalized relationship doesn't mean that love wasn't real.
Well, you do have a way with words. When it ends, it doesn't feel like it was ever real. But I know that that's definitely me projecting.
We love you, dear.
Thanks for listening to The Empty Closet, brought to you by 1019 Coast FM Cairns.